So welcome everyone on this beautiful winter's morning. I'm Louise Carroll and I'm joined by my co-founder Susan Brady. And today we're going to dive into one of the most pressing challenges for startups. Not alone, I suppose we'll put funding there as well, but it's attracting and keeping the right talent. So whether you're hiring for your first employee or equally scaling your team, talent is your growth engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick into the next slide and we're just going to go through exactly what we're going to cover off today. But as Fiona said, please feel free to put anything question-wise into the chat box and we'll make it as interactive as possible. So we're going to look at 5 specific areas today that key areas founders need to master when it comes to hiring. What great talent is looking for in 2025. How to build a compelling employer brand, the tactics that actually work when sourcing and equally onboarding, the common hiring traps, pitfalls that we see founders fall into, and most importantly, how to keep the talent you fought so hard to hire. So just, I suppose, to pause there and get a quick show in the chat of, is there anyone actually hiring or thinking of starting in the next couple of weeks? Whether it's their first hire or just adding to their team right now. Chris. Team. Okay, great. I suppose what I would like to do is, obviously, if there's any specific questions to the individuals that are actually in the middle of this process, feel free to obviously ask in the moment. If you want to obviously keep it confidential, fine. You can obviously follow up directly with Susan and I after the call. But really want to try and get the most of your burning questions answered on this call. So we'll just kick on to the next slide.
Sorry, it's just a bit slow. Just 1 second.
No worries at all.
Yeah, there we are.
Perfect. Well, this individual needs no introduction, but I think Steve Jobs nailed it on this one. It is one of my favorite hiring quotes. And really, it's in a startup, every hire matters. 1 A+ hire is worth more than 5 B- players. The early hires, and we see this across the board, be it medtech, femtech, any of the techs, it's basically the early hires really do set the tone, the culture, the pace, and equally the trajectory. You cannot afford to compromise. So I think where we see a lot of the pitfalls at this point when it's the initial stages, it could be your first, your second, your third hire, is that you get the funding and you go at speed. And that is where so many, founders and the most experienced have fallen short, because it really does take the time to put a lot of depth into what you actually really need, as opposed to thinking, I think, we'll go with the CTO now and then we'll go with the next data analytics person on the next round. It really is doing as much strategy in the people perspective as it is that you do to the your go-to-market strategy. So it's just making sure that you're aligning on the vision, the risk tolerance, the roadmap. And we work with a lot of founders at that early Series A stage where it's like, okay, what are your kind of first 5 key hires? Often it's the co-founder level relationship that candidates are brought into and they're sold by. It's the technical excellence, it's the leadership, it's the startup fit. Most great candidates, they're obviously not actively looking. So it's really for us to be able to do a talent map and look at who are the top 20 CTOs within this specific specialized tech space, whether it's medtech or fintech. And it's really being able to do that type of research way ahead of the game. Like, it's not like when you get your funding, let's go. It's really thinking, as Fiona said earlier, get to know talent consultant way before you go into any of this process, so you have that level of credibility, you have respect, you have trust, and you have that individual that works with you has the insights and can bring you that type of talent quite quickly. So it's really mastering that level of research before we get into actually finding those individuals and going through the actual process itself. So we just go to the next slide, please.
Sorry, Louise, can I
Yeah,
just say something there? One thing that we notice very early on, I mean, I've spoken to a number of CEOs about this, is identifying what your culture is. You might find the best person technically to do a job, but if they don't fit to your culture, so being very clear about that culture. And there's been instances where you've taken on somebody, and you know they're not a cultural fit, and no matter how expert they are, it doesn't work. So just maybe doing a little bit of work around that culture piece. And I think we spoke about that earlier, Louise, that I think you do that, from a very early.
a very early stage, yeah, and
Mm.
it's absolutely, it's a must, right? And I think like we've seen quite a few that just hasn't the depth and breadth hasn't been put into that culture piece, and because they're going so fast,
Yeah.
and it's just allowing yourself to really just put the time and effort into that piece, because you'll have to unravel it 6 months later if you do make that mistake. So I do think there's a quick kind of, I suppose, poll out there. How long would you think it would take to hire something like a CTO? And I think there's quite there's a misunderstanding of sometimes the duration it takes to hire a key hire like a CTO. Let's see the stat here. So I think just on the duration piece, really it's anything from 4 to 6 months in terms of what that looks like, from the research to the actual shortlist to the actual transaction itself. There is a lot of requirement at the early stages where the founders get involved to sell the vision, the brand, the culture, and this is where a lot of the time and effort goes in. Because at the end of the day, there is a market out there that has so many, over 2,000 startups within Ireland. It's a very competitive space. So when you don't have a brand to actually sell, it really is the founder themselves that are selling that culture and the vision. And it's what individuals get behind. They want to be part of that from the ground up. So just, I suppose, to look at the hiring, obviously, where I was saying on a CTO, I think some founders we're kind of shocked by duration of hire, how long it actually takes. So I do think, the more you can do up front, the better. So if you're like 3 or 6 months out from hiring a key hire like a CTO, there's a lot of the groundwork that can be done, whether it's looking at the market conditions, the location strategy. And that's where we really do help founders in terms of that market intel. So again, it's like reaching out to the communities. And I think when I look at what Gentic have done, and Sean Blanchfield, he's used all the communities that he's been part of throughout many of his previous startups to really build a core team and go at scale quite quickly because of that depth and breadth that he's had previously. So just, I mean, we go to a lot of events, but Scale Ireland, they're working, there's over 2,000 tech startups in Ireland. So again, employing over 50,000, it still is a key challenge for all founders, is the hiring space. Again, technical and more the data analytics, the engineering side, they remain still the number one skill gap, according to Skillnet's Ireland, and obviously the CEOs across Ireland. According to Forbes as well, the vision and the culture, back to Fiona's point, is definitely the main attraction for top talent. So just moving on then, I think, obviously we can't get away from not mentioning AI. So really just to look at this and take you through from I suppose, a recruitment perspective, where we're seeing a lot of our founders and the startups going in on is obviously using it to source. So using the likes of LinkedIn AI Recruiter, it does. I mean, it brings up like 3 times faster than obviously anyone going out and manually sourcing. So it is a fantastic tool, and the higher EZ is as good. So we do see, we're taking a lot of time waste from that particular perspective in the sourcing side. And then we're seeing it obviously on the CV side when it's been screened. We're being able to do that a lot quicker. The CV matching, there's algorithms cut, and obviously time to interview then is ramped up to 40%, which is brilliant. So it's bringing kind of the clunky stuff that's seen across recruitment into kind of more of a very polished version where it can obviously give back time at the right points in terms of that networking, having conversations, looking at the culture and the vision, and then like really creating that really slick process. So it's looking at obviously ChatGPT, we use that as well for job descriptions, but again, it's being able to use that for improve the actual inclusive language as well, which is really what we want to see. Again, it's not changing how startups hire, but it's a tool, right? It's not going to substitute for human connection. It can help do everything a lot quicker. But remember, obviously, it is a tool, and we want to be able to know the best hires want human connection. And we know that at the very senior level, it is very much that level of rigor in terms of bringing them in and understanding what that vision is. And you won't get that from any sort of bot or cutting that process out itself. So yeah, again, it is definitely helping our life be able to spend a lot more time with the conversation as opposed to the process itself. So again, they're saying by 2026 is expected that more than 50% of hiring workflows will be AI assisted at some stage from sourcing to onboarding. Was there any question there?
I think someone had a question back to the duration of time to hire a CTO.
Yeah.
Sharing about 3 to 6 plus months.
Just on that, we're finding actually, I'm finding with companies that I'm working with that can actually take longer. It's quite, it's a very crowded space. A lot of startups are looking for that CTO piece. And one of the things, and I know, Louise, you and I spoke about this, is what's that package for that early stage, that early stage CTO? The person that you're going to take on is usually quite senior. You're probably not going to have the funding in place to, supplement what they would have been getting in, say, a larger organization. And I think we spoke about, how you put that employee option scheme together and having that foundational piece, really bedded in before you start to go out. So that's just what we're seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with you. I think just looking at this slide itself, where we're seeing they're not top talent, they're not chasing the titles, they're chasing actual meaning, the impact, the alignment and flexibility. They want to be able to see how they can shape the company, not just fill the role itself. They don't want to be another cog in the machine. And I think that's, they're always halfway out the door at that point. But where we're seeing is that really it's about being able to, as Fiona said, the lack of funding, it's being pretty kind of dynamic and strategic about what you can actually offer a CTO or a CFO at this early stage. And it really is that like building from the ground up. And anyone that's in this and used to that kind of scale up environment, that's exactly what they're chasing. If they're coming from one Series A to another, it really is the vision where the story is at this certain point in time and where that can actually go. It's fundamentally the most important part, as is obviously the overall package itself. But it really is the magic happens through the actual communities themselves. So the more a founder can really be part of different communities that are obviously specific to their startup, the more they will obviously ramp up their network, and they will be able to then obviously brand out exactly what they're trying to do. So it's just taking time to try and increase that level of impact. They want to be able to feel the mission, the values at a very early stage before obviously getting into the actual recruitment process itself. So we do see obviously a lot of tactics that work. I mean, referrals, we know they are 4 times better, and they do tend to stay so much longer. So it really is an incentive to be part of that network and communities, and get out there and go to events that are specific to your sector itself. It does obviously take time, but it does pay off in the long term. We do see that across the communities as well. Skill-based hiring, again, it's obviously being able to use specific case studies and really seeing that level of technical and practical work as well before obviously going forward with any sort of offer. Obviously specialist talent search firms as well. There's a lot of candidates, as we mentioned earlier, that aren't looking, and there needs to be a brand sold and a story put in place for them to consider obviously maybe stepping away from where they are. So there is, as I said, there's a lot of tactics that work, but they need to be bedded in very early on. And because it does take the guts of 6 months to get individuals over the line at this level. And that's what we see again and again. Just moving on to what top talent is really looking for in 2025. So again, it's nothing groundbreaking. It is. Number one is definitely impact, and followed. I mean, anyone that's kind of done startup and has been there for the funding rounds and seen it go from Series A to Series B, they know what the conditions of salary will look like. They're not always chasing that. It obviously can be incentivized with the share options, etc. But they're looking for that, growth aspect where they really are going to be on a mission to do something completely different and see the value on that. So it's really ensuring that you are aligning that very early on, and they're bought in by the founders. At the end of the day, it's a small family, so they're going to have to work very closely with the founders and making sure that if there's 2 founders, that there is a good relationship there and they're bought in by those 2 individuals. And again, a lot of the startups offer great flexibility as well. So individuals, are bought in by that. Again, a lot of early stage Series A, we would help them on fractional work. So they may just take a fractional CTO until they decide exactly where they want to be. And so that could be a 3 days a week. So we are seeing quite a lot of demand for the fractional side, just until, I suppose, early startups know exactly what they want long term. So 49% of employees say that they would leave their job if flexibility was reduced. That's no surprise. 7% say their sense of purpose defines their identity. Again, is really echoing what we've spoken about and how important that level of value is and mission. So just moving on to how to build a strong employer brand. So again, Jeff says it well. It's not what people say about when it's your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So we all know that too well. So just to look at this across the board then, as a founder, your voice and story build credibility. So I was working with another fintech recently, and we were just looking back to that early doors where it was probably this time last year, and they went quickly in terms of, they had the funding from Series A. Let's just go with the first tranche of hiring. And he looks back today and he's thinking, God, I actually didn't understand how important a brand was. I just thought it was a logo and we could just go, quite quickly to market. And it really is so much more than that. It's like, obviously, when you're looking at your customer base, it's creating that level of loyalty, credibility, trustworthiness. Like, it says it all. So it's just really taking the time as well to put that effort into how it's going to obviously execute in the long term. So again, it's just a bit of obviously feedback, share authentic stories, show your team. Again, the more credible you can be in front of an audience, and so true to yourself in terms of what's gone right, equally what's gone wrong. To any candidate, that's just showing your level okay, this individual is authentic. They are obviously true to themselves. They can see where they've failed in the early stages, but they can see obviously the impact of where they need to be and to change. So I do think the more of those stories have brought a lot of talent in terms of where we are in the process. That's what really does get candidates over the line, is being able to see that level of openness. Again, like LinkedIn is a great platform. It's probably the monopoly, but it is what we have. So I think use it to the best of one's ability, you know, sharing your journey, sharing your story. It's obviously a great place to brand. It's also a great place to obviously post that you'd be looking for jobs. You can add people, you can put in a community where you can add, say, like, you know, we're looking to hire in the next couple of months. If you're interested in working for this brand, this is our story. Feel free to be added to our talent community. That way you're actually organically building up a lovely community of talent without having to actually have the job ready to go at that point. Candidates obviously are looking for purpose. They're not looking obviously for perks at this point. So it really is just, it sounds really basic, but it's, you forget, because people are going at speed, that they just forget to put this level of thought into it. Companies with strong employer brands see up to 50% lower cost per hire and 28% lower turnover. And that's according to LinkedIn stats this year. So great talent chooses culture, clarity, and learning opportunities. Make these visible and real, as we've discussed. So we're going to kick over to the onboarding journey, which is exceptionally important. And I will just pass over now to Susan.
Thanks, Louise. So look, you've done all the great work. You've got your hires on board, but this is where the fun starts. So one of the biggest mistakes that we see time and time again is where companies actually underestimate the onboarding part. So think about it. You've worked really hard to secure a great hire. You've pitched the mission, showed the vision, navigated all of the interviews. And then if the momentum suddenly starts to drop, and that's how you actually really lose great talent. So it's really important that you continue to show the energy and care right through to day one and beyond. So don't see onboarding as admin, like see it as your first and your most powerful opportunity for retention. So just going to share some kind of really tactical steps with you, but honestly, these work and they don't involve spending lots of money at all. So even starting before day one, send your welcome note out, you know, even making sure that they have access to tools. You'd be surprised where some candidates report back they didn't have access on the first day, and that really led to kind of a poor taste. And just make them feel part of that story. Like they've already decided they want to be part of your why, so make them feel that from the very beginning. The 30, 60, 90-day plan, that's something that could be a co-creation exercise, because what you're doing is you're getting your you're getting your candidates excited when they join, and ensuring you assign a mentor. Every new hire should have a go-to person. And something that we also deem to be really important is that weekly check-in, whether it's with a leader or founder, even if it's only 15 minutes or if it's a coffee conversation. Honestly, these make a huge difference. So really, I suppose, in essence, the onboarding should be structured, but genuinely it needs to be profoundly human. And that's how you actually really start to build that loyalty from day one. Okay. So let's just zoom out for a moment. And Louise had already mentioned about what makes, people want to stay, or what was enticing them to the organization in the first place. We talked about it, not salary or title, the vision, connection, momentum. And obviously this might change slightly, for different organizations. But I think it's the mission and values that do outweigh compensation for most candidates that we are engaging with, in 2025. That is your leverage, that's your opportunity. So, you might not be able to afford to outpay big tech, but you can outpurpose them. And that's the opportunity about the why. So, Louise mentioned earlier about all of the niche communities and the founder forums, not relying on the job boards, and you can continue to do that. Or you can bring in an embedded partner as well to kind of help you get the individuals over the line. But honestly, if you start with kind of leading with meaning and making every role feel like an opportunity, which is kind of shaping something important. So it's what is the vision of your organization and helping people to kind of believe in that. And that doesn't matter how small or where you're at that particular part of the journey. And that's really how you start to kind of get employees in as, you know, kind of game changing, I suppose, versus just seeing them as your early hires. So as we move on to developing and retaining talent, honestly, we can tell you that you don't need big budgets to retain talent. You'd be surprised that it's very much about the small things that you do that have really a strong cumulative effect. And I suppose what we could also share is that retention doesn't need to begin with a laundry list of benefits. You know, where you're at in your stage of growth, if you're very early, you're not going to maybe have the opportunity to be providing any benefits. Like, it does help, but honestly, the simple things around making people feel seen and supported. You know, people want to grow, they're excited, excuse me, about your mission, and they've already, you know, taken that leap of faith. So it's about kind of continuing that journey with them. So like, even if you can't offer those big, you know, pay raises or the different benefits, you can do other things. Like, you can offer development, you know, stretch projects, mentorship. That could be someone else within the organization, you know, honest, timely feedback. You'd be surprised at how much of an impact that actually has. How are they getting on? They might have moved from, you know, another big organization. It's the first time maybe working in a startup environment, and they want to really understand how they're getting on. You know, what they shared with you in the interview about rolling up the sleeves, they want to really show you that. So just help them to make them feel that they're making a difference. Obviously, if that's the case, if they are doing well. So kind of building that culture of recognition, you know, celebrating the small wins. Believe me, we all need them. You know, when you're on that kind of growth stage, it can be very challenging. There can be kind of 5 steps forward, or maybe feel like 2 steps back, but it's important to celebrate those wins and having your people be brought in on that journey with you as well. And giving people the ownership. Like, if you said that the culture of your organization is about that autonomy, like, show them that that's what you're going to give them instead of micromanaging. Like, there's peer-led learning and there's low-cost coaching initiatives that you can do as well. And they can go a really long way. But it's really just starting with the basics of getting to understand what makes someone tick, what do they need from you, what do, you know, and helping your managers, if you have a small leadership team or if you are at a different stage of growth, helping to set them up for success as well. You'd be surprised at some of the things that we hear from individuals is maybe not having a one-to-one. They didn't have a one-to-one for 5 weeks, and that made them feel that they weren't being valued from the very beginning. Sorry, excuse me, I'm just going to have a bit of water. So
while you're having some water there, Susan, Louise, there's a nice question in the chat there from Colin. He just asks, have you found a way to check if a candidate really understands the move from a corporate to a startup? Many talented tech people working in large corporates find it more difficult to adjust to the early stage startup, in his experience. So, I don't know if you have any comments on that. Good question.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really good question. So obviously, let's say from a founder's perspective, a lot of the founders that I'm working with, predominantly, let's say, across the tech space right now, there's a good few that would want to obviously come, you know, from big tech into a Series A. There's a lot of resistance from the founder side, just due to them not having that prior experience. They've obviously worked in the likes of, let's say, a Meta or a Google, and sometimes from that type of profile, if someone's been in Google, let's say, for the last, you know, 10 plus years, they just see it as someone who is quite structured and has obviously a team to do everything. And would they be able to come and work in this type of challenging space, you know? And I think it's really about telling that story of that individual, because each individual, right, has had a different career path. So let's say if this person in 10 years at Google, but they've equally seen so many of the M&A stuff, they've been part of it, they like Google acquiring, let's say, Fitbit or whatever it could have been, and they were part of different processes, and actually it's just about fundamentally making that more clear. And if I'm going to be introducing this type of talent to a founder, it's about really getting that story told, as opposed to them just looking at a profile and seeing like 10 years at Google. So there's a little bit of awareness that some founders need, and it's just a re-education part. But again, some aren't made for the startup area either. So it's really having that early stage conversation with candidates to say, you're looking to move from big tech into the scaling or startup environment. Have you really thought about this? There is a little bit of education on the candidate side too, because they're seeing some of their other directors doing it, and they've spun off out of the ecosystem into creating a startup. But it's really thinking, is it for you? Are you into this risk environment? It's a lot of kind of work that we would do with candidates that are maybe thinking about that change. And some really are ready for it. Some, they haven't really probably gone through those questions in their own mind. They've just seen other colleagues do it and think, oh, this is probably something that I might like. So yeah, I think it's from a founder perspective, just to kind of cut this clear and stop talking. But I think the founders, there's some that are very much, no, I do not need someone from big tech. So it's individuals that have maybe had one type of scaling Series A behind them, and then it's like, okay, I will obviously review that. That's a little bit more interesting for me. But it's really an education piece, because it's about selling that individual and what they may have done in Google or Meta or wherever, as opposed to just seeing them as one person that has just been there for that period of time.
And I also think, to add to that, it's just important to understand what a person's why is. So, like, don't make any assumptions that because someone's come from big tech that maybe they won't thrive, because it's down to the individual. I think you can bake that into the how you're going to interview them as well. So, like, really be very clear with what the setting is, and like if it's really scrappy and all of that, like just be really clear, and maybe bring those into probing questions that you will ask, how they would, those hypotheticals, and how would you survive and what would you do in X, Y, Z, and just to really be very clear. Some people will jump at that opportunity, others think they might want it, and then maybe it might be, actually, maybe that's not the move I need to make, but then utilising your recruiting partner or whoever's doing the hiring to be able to kind of help dig into that as well. But really good question, and something that we get quite a bit as well.
Sorry, just to come in on that a little bit, and again, I'm just bringing in my experience. Sometimes you get the hire wrong, and that happens often. So just, mechanisms, I think, for early stage companies. What do you do when you've hired the wrong person? What are the steps you can take, and how can you sort of prevent, difficult situations?
Yeah, would definitely agree with you on that.
So what can you do? If you know after 6 weeks that person is the wrong hire, what do you do? Do you try to, mentor them? What would you advise a company that's taken on a wrong hire?
I think the sooner you take action, I think it's addressing the elephant in the room and having a conversation, because you never know that the potential employee might be glad that you brought that up. And to have a conversation, maybe they're not settling in as well, or it's actually, is there anything else that they need maybe that might help set them up for success, and they can kind of build in timeframes beyond that. But I think it's really important not to ignore it, because the longer you leave it, it's going to cost more, both from the mental energy perspective, but also as well from a resource and your financial perspective. And to be honest, when you're at that stage of growth, you don't have that opportunity or luxury to be able to, make the mistake but correct it early.
Just another thing, that I see is that, HR contract, that employment contract.
Yeah.
Having those very early on, where it has those steps that you take, if it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you on that. I do think from a legal perspective, having a really, a really strong relationship with your chief people officer, and aligning on the people strategy, the engagement levels. Like, I do know one particular CEO or founder, and he would, again, there are only, I think there's 60 employees, but again, he still goes out of his way to try and meet them, whether it's weekly or on a monthly basis, but it's on a frequent measure that they feel like they've had their voice heard. So he can really get a pulse on what's happening within the culture of the organization, because he knows how fast it's moving, and equally how important the people are to this engine. So it's really, he's pulled the curtains back, and he knows himself from previous mistakes that he really does need to put that level of effort in. And again, it's being able to hear the voice then from the individual, because maybe it hasn't been the right role, and maybe there needs to be changes made, or maybe they would be better in a customer success role over the sales role. You have to kind of really have that ongoing dialogue when it's this scrappy, because that's the only way you're going to be able to move on, or equally end that level of contract where you go through obviously the various different steps that your CPO would take you through.
And I think someone has mentioned on the chat about, that open communication. And I think that's really, really important. So you can kind of put those measures in place that will help to facilitate that. We'll move on to some of the mistakes, and we've probably highlighted some of those already. But look, forgive yourself if you do get things wrong. It's part of learning, and it's about, that's the journey. So, some of the key things that we've seen is that kind of fast hiring. We know you've got to get out of the gates and get the hires in, but actually if you go too fast with maybe not bringing the right person in, the costly turnover. Also as well, the skipping those proper kind of onboarding, it also sends a clear message that, people aren't being truly valued. And when a role isn't clearly defined, which we've kind of talked about earlier, where it could lead to that, mishire, that can lead to confusion and disengagement. Don't forget about candidate experience. Can't highlight this enough. Every candidate is a potential ambassador, whether you hire them or you don't. If they have a bad experience, it sticks, because remember that the future hires of your organization, people are talking out in the ecosystem. So just remember, it's equally as important for those you don't hire as those you do hire as well. What I love about, is thinking of your hiring as a kind of a product market fit, it's easier to kind of come up with that kind of analogy, because if you think about it, if you missell the role or you skip the necessary prep or you take it like a checklist, it'll backfire. Like, your reputation as an employer is being formed every single time someone applies, someone interviews or joins your team. So just slow down and be thoughtful.
I think Chris has raised his hand.
Can I put this question at the opposite end of the scale, as an employee?
Yeah.
Take, for example, the employee was working with you for, say, for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And they're making mistakes and they've got their CV is excellent, and their references were excellent, and absolutely everything was excellent, and they started off brilliantly, and out of the traps, as the phrase goes, and then suddenly they just go downhill, and you just can't get rid of them. What is the legal status on that? How, I mean, like, do you push them out, or as in, like, ease them out, or get them to get them to what's the right way about it, and the wrong way about it, and or is it just like pull the plaster out and just tell you, like, there's the door?
Well, there is performance management protocols that you would put in place that would line up with, if you have somebody who's responsible for HR, that would kind of talk you through that. If you're kind of feeling your way, there are people that you can connect with to kind of get that advice. But I think, starting off with the conversation to understand what's going on, because maybe there's something in the background that one doesn't know, if it's a sudden change in delivery, or you feel like maybe this person has been turned up almost the complete opposite to how it was perceived in the interview process. So it's kind of getting to understand what that is, and then going through the employment legal process of making sure that you're doing everything right to protect you as a company, and also for the employee themselves as well, so that either they get the opportunity to kind of course correct within a time frame, and if not, then there would be the update as to, maybe this is not working out, and you go through the kind of right protocols to make sure that's done properly. But like, usually if there's an open conversation, that someone has the opportunity maybe to improve whatever it is, there might be something else going on. Without knowing the full context, it's hard to kind of diagnose directly, but I think just following the right steps, even though that can be incredibly painful, and it probably goes back to what you're saying, is that the opposite, someone showed up really well during the interview process, but actually this has turned into something different. So it's kind of getting to the root cause of what that is, and doing it in a way that's going to be helpful and protect both the company and the individual. I don't know if that really answers your question, because it can be quite sensitive, and I'm happy to chat offline either, but it is.
No, it has slightly. But the other end of it is, what happens if the company was bullying the other person as well, like, or an individual? I'm just looking at it from past experiences working for a corporate. And I was like, I've seen bullies within the management end of things.
Mhm.
They're pushing them out and everything else. I just how do you deal with that in that respect as well? While it is someone in HR, or it is like it is, or else it is a small company. I've seen a small company bullying an individual as well as a friend as well. So I'm just,
I mean, it's about flagging to the right person. So if it is going to whoever's, if it's just making sure that you're taking those right steps in flagging above to whoever is the right person, if it's going to be CEO or whoever is, manager or manager above, and recording that. Because things like if you're looking at WRC or, the workers' relations, they will look to make sure that you've done all the right things up front to ensure that you went through the right steps in flagging what needed to be done. And then it's about, a conversation on ensuring that, I don't like whatever way that has been conducted within the company would be an open conversation on highlighting and making sure that that's been dealt with appropriately. It feels like it's quite a sensitive topic. So, but again, these things do happen when you're in situations where there's humans involved, but it's about making sure that it's been flagged appropriately. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. And the next slide as well. So wanted to kind of highlight a couple of metrics, given where we're at with time. And I think some of these things are really important for you to understand, particularly your stage of growth. And really simple things around, offers and hiring process, like your offer acceptance rate, understanding really what that means is how popular your organization is, and looking at those metrics over a monthly or quarterly basis. And then also, are people staying past 3 months and then 12 months? And then really understanding how engaged they are from day one. These are your essential kind of people performance indicators, and it's really important that you do track them because you'll be able to spot trends early on. And looking at these as not just HR metrics, but that they're the growth metrics of your company. So kind of finishing, we've gone through today that it is your number one founder responsibility, i.e. hiring. So hopefully we've elevated the importance of that. We've also spoken about the mission and not just the job title, and then the importance of culture, whether you intentionally plan it or not. We believe our hiring well is it's probably one of the most powerful things that you can do to build a great company. So it's really important that you get it right as much as possible. So there's kind of 3 things we did want you to walk away with today, or at least to maybe take some practical steps. You've heard the why and the what. So we ask you to identify 3 people to reach out to this week. They could be hires or connectors, just someone that you want to connect with. I'm sure you are already probably doing this, but maybe if you could take like an active step to identify who those are, and maybe to post a founder update or something, about your mission online. Again, that could be on LinkedIn or it could be on a blog. And if you're not hiring now, or you are in the future, or you even want to just re-look at a previous job description to kind of think about it, what we've mentioned today, does that hold true for the clarity, purpose, and impact that your company does have? So hiring is continuous. We mentioned before, when you're not even hiring, it's something that should be taken into account on a continuous basis, because essentially it's actually telling the story to the external world why individuals will want to work for your company at whatever stage of growth that you're at.